no, quickly.
Okay,
One
sorry.
minute. 1 minute.
1 minute.
Okay. Okay, so Anjum gave me the idea. You have the two eyes as me in Kenya. And then taking off and coming to Canada. And you always thought, oh, Canada's a land of milk and honey when you come from Kenya. And then you get here and it's like, oh, actually, life in Kenya was actually really good. We didn't have any winter. So there did a lot of blocks on the bottom. My journey trying to figure out coming to Canada. We thought it was going to be really easy, and it was a bit of a struggle. And then my life in Scarborough actually starts with this little eye that I put here because I didn't actually think about this, but my son was born. He's 19 now, but we moved to Scarborough 19 years ago. And that was when he was born because my in-laws live at Warden and Finch, and so we wanted to be closer to them to get like babysitter services, and so so that's when my life in Scarborough starts. But also starts maybe a little bit forward, but this is sort of my environmental journey. The flowers represented my environmental journey and my work in parks. And then when I started working at Park People, that's when I discovered community development. And I had no idea how many amazing communities there are in Scarborough. And so although I was trying to get to as tall as possible, I was like, okay, what is this? Why is that? And it's like, because these represent all the beautiful communities in Scarborough. And when we have these workshops, I was like, pick up the phone, and you guys know when you got the call for this workshop, right? And yesterday there were 5 people registered for the workshop, and my Scarborough community always comes through. And some of you, I know from way back when, and some of you I'm just meeting today, but I always feel that there is such a strong connection. Some of you we met last year. There's always such a strong connection with Scarborough folk.
Community.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So just a bit a debrief of that exercise. So I didn't tell you that this was going to be your journey. I didn't tell you any of that. And maybe it was your first time playing Lego, maybe not. But the whole point of this exercise was first to learn about each other, which I think you guys did a beautiful job of storytelling. I love that. And so it was to practice storytelling, and storytelling in a way that gets us out of our heads and into our bodies and using our hands. Our hands actually have more connections to our brain than any other part of our body.
Really?
So yes, 80% of our motor neurons are in our hands. So we actually learn through our hands, doing things with our hands. There's a reason why it feels good to make things and build things and play.
Yeah, I like working with my hands. That makes sense now.
And it also reinforced our embodied knowledge. So knowledge that's buried in our bodies, that doesn't live in our heads but lives in our bodies, can come through our hands when we build things. So we kind of can surface things that maybe if I just asked you to go around and tell, maybe the stories would have been different. I think they would have been different. Okay, so but then this exercise was to prime us for another exercise which we're going to do. But I wanted to talk just briefly about generosity hubs and what we're. Oh no.
It's on the board. Exclamation 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, is that it? Okay. Yeah, so I'm just going to walk through this generosity hub background very quickly. There's kind of a lot here. Manaz and I have been working in Scarborough for the past 3 years, and we've been doing these workshops with many of you. And what we're learning, and all of our workshops are ostensibly about climate action in Scarborough. What makes sense for Scarborough community members in terms of climate action? What kind of climate programs do we want to see? What will make us climate resilient? What will help us adapt? And what we're learning is that we can't have any of that unless we have a strong community. And we do have a strong community in Scarborough, but
strong base.
Strong base. But to build on that base means that we're going to be even more resilient and be able to better adapt. So so we came up with this idea, and it's not really just an idea, and we really think that it's a progression of all of our research learnings. So generosity, this is a definition from the University of Notre Dame, is defined as giving good things to others freely and abundantly. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about generosity. And why do we want to? I don't want to mess this up. Okay, why do we need generosity experiments? Okay. So, for all of the good things that you guys talked about, I think, Andrew, you were talking about some of the things that are frustrating in our current economic system, right? Our current economic system tells us from a very young age that we need to be the best, we need to compete, we need to be out in front, we need to hustle for scarce resources because there's not enough. There's not enough. So we're told these things about the economy that are not true. That there's not enough, that we are separate, and that we need to compete. All of those things are not true. The purpose, this doesn't mean that an economy is bad. The purpose of our economy is to provide for each other, to meet the needs of the community. That's what an economy is for. But our needs are not just monetary. They're not just about money. We have needs that are common to all people on the planet, and those are needs for affection, needs for rest, needs for identity, and the need for protection, participation. Sustenance is what we're talking about, but sometimes that's all we think about when we think about economy. We think we need what we need to survive physically, but we also need things to survive spiritually, emotionally, right? As human beings, these other things like freedom, the ability to create, and the ability to be understood. So we need to be understood. These are fundamental human needs. And I don't know, you tell me, does our current economic system meet those needs? That's where community comes in, right? It's community that meets those needs.
This is called this social generosity. The social generosity, that is the most important.
Social needs, exactly. So we have these other needs. And what happens, okay, so our current economic system, I don't think this is controversial to say, it incentivizes extraction, meaning that it takes advantage of people.
Yep.
And it incentivizes endless growth, which is not part of how the natural world works. Nothing in the natural world grows endlessly. Our economy is artificial.
Wastefulness.
100%.
Overproduction of everything.
Right.
We don't need a million. Sorry.
You got it. So all of
Getting angry again.
Yeah. No, it's okay to get a little bit angry because what we're seeing right now, what we're experiencing right now with climate crisis, with growing inequity, the housing crisis, food insecurity, mental health, loneliness, anxiety, inequality, addiction to consumerism, autocratic technology that steals our intellectual property, our identities, dispossession, meaning we're having less and less, we own less and less, we are able to do less and less, ill health, etc. All of these symptoms, all of these are symptoms of our economic system, actually. And so what happens when we have those unmet needs? So our economic system isn't meeting our needs that I talked about on the previous slide. What we're seeing is that our unmet needs lead to pathologies. For example, we're addicted to consuming. We're addicted to work. Like we have this hustle culture where we think it's okay to say, I'm so busy all the time. And busyness is now seen as something to be celebrated. Or we don't have time to rest. And that's also a pathology. We should be resting. So then we see that our emotional and mental health degrades, but also our regenerative spaces shrink. And you guys all talked about green spaces and shrinking of the green spaces, or not appreciating green spaces and maybe appreciating them more now that they're shrinking. So these are things that are happening, right? This is where we are. And what the good news is that if we prioritize things like connection, like healing and restoring, this is called the regenerative triad, these practices are actually reinforcing. So if we have projects that reconnect us to people and place for work, play, learning, and celebration, then can heal. And when we heal, then we have time and space to actually restore, to participate in these restorative activities. When we restore, we also heal. When we heal, we're able to better connect. So these things are all reinforcing. So this is kind of a hopeful way of thinking of disrupting the current system. But how do we do that practically? We don't know, but we're thinking that generosity has something to do with it. So generosity experiments are alternatives to the pervasive narratives of scarcity. So we say, actually, we don't believe that scarcity is true. We are nature, and nature is abundant. If you plant a garden, if you plant a garden, one seed actually leads to thousands of seeds. We have more than we know what to